I'm joined today by John White, who's the author of What Happened to the Republican Party and What It Means for American Politics. John, as I'm sure you know, many have been discussing the sort of impact or significance of Donald Trump as the presumptive Republican nominee on the party. Is it going to lead to a split within the Republican Party? Does this signify some turning point in the Republican Party? But you actually make the case that this sort of rift in the Republican Party dates back even beyond the failed candidacy of Mitt Romney, but really even to George W. Bush's presidency. So set it all up for us to sort of get us into this discussion.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me, David. This problem that the Republican Party has, in some ways, goes all the way back to Ronald Reagan, very ironically. Reagan was a bomb to the Republican Party, a gift to the Republican Party. And Reagan really brought the Republican Party to parity with the Democrats and to near majority status. The revolution that he set in place culminating in 1994 with the Republican takeover in the House. One problem, however, is that the Republicans held on to Ronald Reagan too long. I call him St. Ronald. He is now an historical figure for our millennials. They've never lived a day that Ronald Reagan was president. And he's been deceased for a fair chunk of their young lives already. That's one problem. The second problem is George W. Bush, because, look, Americans view George W. Bush as a failed president. And nothing helps a party like a successful president, a la Ronald Reagan. So that was always going to be a problem for the party. How do they come to grips with George W. Bush? How do they deal with the failures of his presidency? And in dealing with that, that's created this split. You have the Tea Party that says, look, Bush was a big government Republican. He spent too much. He engaged in failed wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. In the end, the country was not better off under his presidency. It was worse off. The third thing that's ongoing, of course, is a demographic revolution. And very simply, when Reagan was elected president, you had 89% of the electorate that was white. Today, in 2012, that was 72%. In 2016, that will go down to about 70%, maybe 69%. Mitt Romney carried whites by the same large majority that Ronald Reagan did in 1980 and 1984. Reagan won, Romney lost. So you have all these problems that were converging on the Republican Party before Donald Trump ever became a candidate. Today, their problems are far worse because the split within the party has been aggravated by Trump. Their demographic problems have been aggravated by Donald Trump. And what we're now facing is not just an historic loss for a presidential candidate, maybe rivaling Barry Goldwater, but we're now facing a Republican brand that is so tarnished, it's going to take years to rehabilitate.
Before we get into the sort of specifics and dynamics of what's going on with Donald Trump, I'd love to address the sort of ideological shift that has taken place in the country and how that relates to the future of the Republican Party. I mean, we've talked about public perception on a lot of social issues. Abortion now, a majority of Americans believe it should be legal in most cases for the first time since Roe v. Wade, according to, I believe it's the Gallup tracking poll. On gay marriage, we've seen a significant liberalization or move to the left on that issue. On many, many issues, we've seen broadly the U.S. electorate move left, but the Republican Party is still raising disproportionate amounts of money from the more extreme elements within it. So how is that going to affect the party?
Well, David, the culture wars are over. Let's start with that. What Reagan did was basically to merge together evangelicals and high socioeconomic status, business-minded, entrepreneur-type Republicans who were never really interested in the culture wars, but did want less government. That that coalition is now basically in tatters. You're right. I mean, on abortion, it's the majority position is now the Bill Clinton position, which is safe, legal, and rare. On gay marriage, this whole question of gay rights has moved with such alacrity. I think it surprised a lot of people, myself included. We always saw that movement going in the direction of gay marriage and general acceptance, but now that has moved with such a degree of force, and particularly among millennials, so that the Republican position, when it comes to gay marriage and so forth, particularly among millennials, is just another disaster for them. I mean, they have got to accept that the culture wars are over. Best thing that happened to the Republican Party was the Supreme Court decision legalizing gay marriage, because now they can say, look, this is the law of the land. It's a settled issue. You know, we may not like it, but we need to move on.
And they sort of have, right? But to something that is of questionable value, which is moving on to, well, number one, this recent focus on transgender bathroom laws, but also arguing along the lines of so-called religious freedom, the Hobby Lobby case, the freedom not to cover contraception as part of insurance. And that was sort of predictable, but I don't know if you think that it's going to be effective electorally in any way.
No, I don't think it's effective. And I think that the effective thing to do is simply to say these are now matters of settled opinion and settled law. And we have a whole bunch of other important issues that we want to talk about to the American electorate more broadly. And they haven't done the hard work of thinking, what does conservatism mean in the 21st century? You know, I mean, look, Reagan never went back to the election of 1944 and said, well, we got to be governed by what the party did in 1944. Republicans going back to Reagan's election in 1980 today is the equivalent of doing the same thing. It's just insane.
Let's talk about Donald Trump a little bit. I mean, there's so much to discuss. Number one, there's just sort of the internal dynamics of Trump positions that on many issues don't in any way reflect what seems to be mainstream Republican opinion. This includes everything from, to some degree, taxation, intervention in terms of Middle East dictators. You know, the list goes on, praising Planned Parenthood as doing great things for millions and millions of women. But in spite of that, we've seen many elements of the Republican primary voters embrace Donald Trump. And now we're actually seeing establishment Republicans, everybody from, you know, Ron Johnson and Senator Kirk and so many others, Mitt Romney, saying this is a bad idea. This is not a good direction. So first of all, how do you think that the broader Republican opinion of Trump will impact the election? And then more generally speaking, I mean, what do you see as happening here in the lead up to the November election?
Well, first, voters are driven by issues, but they're also driven by raw emotion, okay? And that involves questions about values. It's the emotion that has really driven the Republican primary electorate led by Barack Obama. Because the Republican primary electorate basically has taken the position that Barack Obama as president has succeeded, but succeeded in entirely the wrong way from their view. First, Obamacare's the law of the land, upheld by the Supreme Court twice. Second, there's a significant number of Republicans who believe that Barack Obama is a Muslim and that he's gotten away with it, that he's anti-American, that he wasn't born in the United States. And of course, Trump led that charge. So the animosity that the president has toward Donald Trump is both real and personal. And that has tapped into this emotion that Republican voters have that their party has failed them. It has failed to stand up to Obama. It's failed to challenge Obama. In some ways, these voters have not, they say they're for the Constitution, but they've never read it in terms of the separation of powers and the fact that control over the Congress doesn't mean that you get what you want with a sitting president there. So all of these things have come together in a way that ironically has allowed Barack Obama to say, not that he said it, but Barack Obama has broken the Republican Party. Um, in, in part because he's driven their base simply completely off the edge. And the Republican establishment, I think after 2012, first they said, look, we've got to deal with immigration. We've got to get this off the table. We know what happened. The reform failed and so on. That was, by the way, the right strategy. But then their focus really was on process. It was about data gathering and technology, which the establishment said Obama did a great job on that, and Romney didn't. It was about moving up their convention to July as opposed to late August. It was all process driven when really it's not idea driven. You know, again, what does conservatism stand for in the 21st century? How do you rethink those arguments? And that's important, and it's needed actually, because conservatism is still a needed, necessary element in American politics. And a viable minority party is essential to the health of our democracy. And right now we don't have either.
Well, it is absolutely fascinating. Again, we've been speaking with John White. He's the author of What Happened to the Republican Party and What It Means for American Politics. We'll be watching it as you will. Thanks so much for talking to us about it.
Thanks so much, David.